Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at something called variable scope. So variable scope in programming refers to the context that a variable is defined in. So variables can be created in your main code and used or modified or accessed anywhere in your program, in your code. And variables can also be created within functions, but they can only be used or accessed or modified within those functions. So these are called local and global variables. A global variable is a variable that's just created in your main code. It's declared outside a function, and its value can be accessed or modified throughout the program. A local variable, on the other hand, is declared inside a function, so it's a local to a function, and it's created and destroyed every time the function runs. So it can't be accessed or modified outside the function. So let's have a look at some examples. What I'll do is I'll just create a variable to store a user's name. All right, and this variable is just created in my main code. So it's not created within any functions or anything like that. So this is going to be a global variable. All right, now if I wanted to create a function, maybe one that just displays the username on the screen or in the console, we'll call it display user. I can access that variable from within the function. So I might just say user, and I'll just concatenate or join this to a string that's going to say inside function. So what this will do is when I call this function, it's going to, in the console, display a little message which will be the username, and then next to that it's going to say inside function. So we know that we're accessing or we're grabbing that variable's value from within a function. All right, and I'll call that function. And if we go and refresh the page with the console open, we see the variable, we see the value Joe, and then we see that little message there, inside function. So we know that we're using that variable within a function. Now, if I tried to access or modify this variable from outside the function, that'll also work. So if I say console.log user, and this time I just say outside function, go back and refresh the page, we see that Joe outside function. All right, so it's a global variable. User is a global variable. It can be used outside functions, or it can be used inside function definitions, because it's global. It can be accessed anywhere. All right, but we also have local variables, and these are variables that are created or declared within functions, and they can really only be used or modified within those functions that they're created in. So let's create another function. This one I'll just call it display other user. All right, and within this function, I'm going to create a variable. All right, I'll create a second user. I'll just call this user2. This can be Sally. And what I'll do is do the same thing that I did before, display the username. So user2 this time. I'll say inside function. And then when I call this function, display other user, we should see Sally. Oops, I've just accidentally put in the wrong brackets there. So for a function definition, make sure you've got curly brackets. I accidentally pressed the square brackets. Okay. All right, so we've created a new function called display other user. We've got a variable that has been created inside this function's definition. So this is a local variable. It's local to the display other user function. It belongs to that, and it can only be used or accessed or modified within this function. So I'm going to call this function now, and we should see Sally inside function. But if I try to do what I did before, where I had this other user variable here, and I was able to access it within the function or access it outside the function. If I try and access this variable, user2, outside the function, let's have a look and see what happens. So user2 plus, and then this time we'll say outside function. What's going to happen? If we save that code and refresh the page, we get an error. It says uncaught reference error, user2 is not defined, and then it's actually telling us on line 18, which is that line of code, the last line of code that we wrote. So it's saying user2 is not defined. And the reason why it's saying that is because user2, this variable, doesn't exist in this scope. It doesn't exist outside the function. It only exists within the function that it was declared in or created in this function definition here. So when we use this variable user2 within the function, that works fine. All right, but if we try and use that variable outside the function, or in a separate function, it's not going to work because the variable is local to the display other user function. It only belongs or only can be seen within that function, within that scope. All right, so that's because it's a local variable. So that's why we get this error on line 18. All right, so that's basically the difference between local and global variables, variables that are created outside function definitions and can be accessed or modified anywhere in your program, and local variables which are declared inside a function definition, and they're basically created and destroyed every time the function runs, all right, and can only be used or modified inside the function that they were declared in, not outside. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.